Before we get into today's episode, I want to thank a couple sponsors that we were able to secure for this season, season 5 of the Scuttlebutt. It's exciting to be able to get sponsors for this. We're really thankful for them. The first one, you might have heard them already, is D&D Metal Recycling and Auto Salvage. The Scuttlebutt's been pairing with D&D for quite some time. D&D began as a small hauling and used auto parts operation in the Pittsburgh area in the late 1970s and has grown into a full-service metal recycling company with 2 locations, Lawrenceville and Tarentum. These are state-of-the-art scrap yards with deep roots in the community and a strong commitment to the service of their customers. D&D accepts all types of metal, both ferrous and non-ferrous, that may be generated by industrial manufacturing, construction and demolition, small commercial entities, as well as individual customers. They have a wide variety of material handling equipment and are capable of managing any job in a timely and efficient manner. You can contact them for quotes and availability at D&D, that's D and D, autosalvage.com. Thank you, D&D, for supporting this podcast. Been wonderful collaborating with you, and we're looking forward to being with you all through season 5 here. We'd also like to thank a new sponsor for the Scuttlebutt, Tobacco-Free Adagio Health. Tobacco-Free Adagio Health is dedicated to preventing and reducing tobacco use and increasing education about tobacco hazards and secondhand smoke. Of course, the best way to be tobacco-free is to never start. And we'll be sharing more about the many programs offered by Tobacco-Free Adagio Health in the future. You can check out more of their work at tobaccofree.adagiohealth. It's ADAGIO health.org. Tobaccofree.adagiohealth.org. Really excited to have sponsors on board for the Scuttlebutt, and I hope you enjoy this upcoming episode. As a civilian, and maybe somebody who, years ago I could probably watch any war movie and feel for the characters and be interested in the story and really enjoy the film and overall the experience. But I think the time that I've spent talking with veterans over the past couple of years and the stories I've heard, the real stories that I've heard, I watch a movie like this and it affects me more now than it did a couple years ago. It affects me more now to watch what I know these guys went through and the losses they experienced because of the time I've spent with veterans. And welcome, everyone, to another episode of The Scuttlebutt. I'm your host, Shaun Hall, Director of Programming with the Veterans Breakfast Club. We're a nonprofit in Western PA whose mission is to create communities of listening around veterans and their stories to connect, educate, heal, and inspire. A lot of times we just cover military topics, and if you've been with us for a while, you may have seen a previous episode of whenever I bring in the band back together. I like to get our co-hosts, Ryan All, Kathryn Guyan, and Evan Mulgrave in to review some post 9/11 war movies. Now, there's been tons of war movies on World War II, on Vietnam, even on Korea. But the recently, recent history of conflict, the post 9/11 generation, there's only so many films that you can look through. So if you've never seen any post 9/11 war movies, we're here to sort of review a lot of these and bring them to you. Well, the 2 that we have for you today, really interesting. I think we have a lot to say about these 2 movies. First is going to be The Outpost, which you can view on Netflix. This was a 2020 American war film directed by Rod Lurie, based on the 2012 nonfiction book, The Outpost, An Untold Story of American Valor by Jake Tapper. And this film concerns the Battle of Kamdesh during the war in Afghanistan. And it stars Scott Eastwood, Caleb Landry Jones, Orlando Bloom, a really great cast of guys. This was a really good film, I felt, but we'll get into that review here in the actual episode. The second movie is actually called Kajaki, The True Story, but that was the British name of the film. It was later released in North America as Kilo 2 Bravo. This is a 2014 British war docudrama film directed by Paul Kadis. We're going to certainly talk about this one. I have a lot to say about it. I really liked it. But we're also going to get the reviews from our co-hosts, Ryan, Kathryn, and Evan. Again, thank you to our sponsors, D&D Auto Salvage and Tobacco-Free Adagio Health, for collaborating with us. And also, if this is your first time watching the Scuttlebutt, please like, share, subscribe, ring the bell on YouTube, comment on YouTube. We love hearing from our fans and from our audience. Send me an email at Shaun, SHAUN, at veteransbreakfastclub.org, especially if you have any other film ideas that you'd say, hey, watch these 2. We'd love to hear your take on them. So without further ado, enjoy the show.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan All. I'm a U.S. Army veteran. deployed to Iraq a few times, and I currently work for the Pittsburgh Vet Center, an organization that provides cost-free and confidential counseling for veterans and their families.
And you're about to retire, or have you retired?
I hit 20 years last week, and I'm waiting for that official notification, and then I will be retiring. Yes.
Oh, we have to have a VBC virtual retirement celebration for Ryan.
Yeah.
The Scuttlebutt audience, I'm sure, will send in some congratulations, Ryan. That's in order, certainly. Fantastic news.
Or jokes or insults. I'll accept those as well. I enjoy that.
I think in your retirement, you should make the hashtag Ryan's Rant TikTok that I called for several movie reviews ago.
We need a new one. Kathryn, welcome back.
Hello, good to be back. Hello, everyone. My name is Kathryn Guyan. I am not a veteran, but I have a deep appreciation for our veterans and a love of sharing their stories. I am a news anchor by trade. I'm a mom. I have a little bit of military history in my family. I'm the proud granddaughter of a World War II veteran. So happy to be here again and talk more movies.
Evan, welcome back for our movie review episode. It's great to have a filmmaker on board.
Appreciate it. My name is Evan Mulgrave. I am a filmmaker. And in 2018, I traveled with the Veterans Breakfast Club to Vietnam to document 6 veterans returning to Vietnam for the first time in 50 years and made the documentary We Left as Brothers, which hopefully will be out streaming early this year.
It's fantastic. For our audience, if you have not seen it yet, we will get the information to you as soon as it's streaming. A really wonderful, wonderful documentary that Evan and his team created. Well, if you've been with us before, then you know we've done some movie reviews. And from the intro, you know that these are post 9/11 war movies that we like to dive into. And I will say that I didn't say in the intro is that both of the movies that we reviewed this time were based on true stories. So if you are lacking in your post 9/11 knowledge, these are 2 movies that I think that would be of interest to you. But Evan, you picked these 2. I was super excited to watch both of them. I figured we'd start with The Outpost. Can you give us sort of like bird's eye view? What was The Outpost and what was it about?
The Outpost is a 2020 film, and it is about a combat unit stationed in, I believe it's called Outpost Keating. Mm-hmm. And it's a very remote outpost with very not great logistics. It's in a very disadvantageous position, very dangerous. And it's about, you follow them for, I don't know what the time period is, close to a year or something like that. But it's about their kind of their struggles of trying to hold that position. And then it all leads up to a large battle. I believe it's called the Battle of Kamdesh. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the bloodiest battles in the Afghan war, as I understand. And yeah, it's I thought it was an excellent film.
Why did you pick it?
Well, you had tasked me for picking 2 movies. So I did a little research and I tried to find some of the ones that were that I may have missed, that were critically acclaimed or had gotten some good write-ups. And this was one towards the top of the list. It was based on a true story as well, which I was more interested in. I think that a lot of the stories of those 2 wars sometimes don't get told as much. So I was interested in checking it out for a couple of different reasons, both because it sounded like a good movie, but also the story itself was something I was interested in.
From a logistics standpoint, Ryan, can you give us some clarity as to like why this base was there and why was it disadvantageous for them to be in that particular position?
Sure. So, during the global war on terror, both in Iraq and Afghanistan, the strategy was taken to, move these large scale units out into outposts, out into the community, out into places that were typically indefensible, right? Because you really only control the ground that you're standing on, especially in the nature of warfare that we were fighting there against, against non-uniformed combatants, operating in the community, So the idea was like, get our forces out there where they can be, where we're moving, where we can see them, where we can provide more, support more quickly. And in Afghanistan, right, if you're not familiar with the geography of Afghanistan, right, it's extremely mountainous, very hard to get around. So these outposts that were out there, especially this one, was way out there, right? Almost inaccessible by road to a certain point, or very, very long trips to get there by road, even long to get there by helicopter. But the idea was to get the forces out there. And then, when you talk about logistic challenges, right? Everything that you're talking about, food, water, gasoline, fuel, ammunition, all of those things that become high priority targets if you're moving them from a large base to a small base across these unimproved roads over mountain ranges. It becomes very easy for insurgents to attack these, convoys of support. And then you compound that with, getting a lot of these supplies there are heavy and you need a lot of them. So then doing it by air still becomes difficult. And then you have to deal with weather at those types of situations as well. And then you talk about tactically, logistically, right? The outpost, which is pointed out in the film, is surrounded by high ground, right? There are thousands of advantageous positions for insurgents to shoot down at you, and that's never really a situation where you want to be in a firefight.
Had you walked onto Camp Keating yourself, would you have been like, "This is nuts"? Like,
yeah, I think it definitely would have been nuts. And there were situations in Afghanistan where officers were relieved and given letters of reprimand for picking and supporting and putting these units in these situations, which were untenable. So, places like Camp Keating are good examples of that, where the due diligence wasn't done, and that the support and the tactical sense wasn't there, but they moved forward with it anyway, and that was irresponsible. So.
And Taliban really was. They see that very quickly in the film, that they were just sort of taking pot shots at the unit down in Camp Keating pretty consistently. They say in the movie, every time they test us, they're just trying to figure out where the weaknesses are. Sure. Kathryn, did you have that sense of claustrophobia that I think they did well as a filmmaker?
I did. Well, I liked this movie from the start. I've had like almost a sense of dread watching it the whole time, because I just felt like I'm a civilian, and not to make light of it, but even I know that like high ground works best. So like I just felt from the get-go, as they were choppering in and they were talking about this place, I was like, this is just not going to end well. And I'm somebody that I kind of went into this blind in a way, like I did not know this story, and now I'm glad I know it. But I just felt like it felt like there was nowhere to go. Like even when they tried to get out, you had that heartbreaking scene where that truck goes over the road in that convoy. It just felt like every time they tried to get out, they physically couldn't, unless they scaled a mountain, like when they were out on patrol. I wrote a note to myself, like even from that first scene where they're choppering in, I was like, this is going to be a tough one, because I just felt like this is not going to end well, and I think they felt it too, which was the sad part. It felt like they felt they were going into a hopeless situation almost.
Evan, as a filmmaker, you're watching this, and I thought the directors did a really fantastic job sort of creating that environment. They weren't filming, in Afghanistan, but they really made it look ominous. Everywhere you looked, there was danger. And Kathryn's right. You really sort of to get into this movie and know that something bad's going to happen.
I would agree. Yeah, I think I thought the director did a great job. There's a shot very early on where Scott Eastwood walks out, and the camera just kind of pans around, and there's just mountains everywhere you go. You really do feel like you're closed into this place. You're trapped. And one of the things that I love when a film does well is give you a sense of space, especially and that's tough to do in war movies, because oftentimes there's a lot of cuts constantly, so you don't know where people are in relation of this. But they do a good job of laying out the outpost in a way of, here's where the mortars are, here's the LVs where we protect the mortars. So you feel like you're kind of living in that space with them. You understand what's important in these areas and things like that. And I think the camera work in general was excellent in the film. There's a lot of like very long takes. There isn't a ton of that kind of cutting. A lot of modern war movies, I feel like, are that way. They're kind of that documentary style where it's tight on people's faces and we're cutting all over the place. But in this film, the camera stays with characters for long periods of time. So, I think it also helps build that sense of you're trapped there with them. The camera's not going to pull away to another shot, to something else happening. You're stuck with these people in these, harrowing situations. So, yeah, I thought the filmmakers did a great job at doing that.
And to that point, Evan, I liked how you're leading up to that day, and there's that scene where they all go on kind of a patrol up to the mountains, and they're looking down and they ask each other, like, if it was you, how would you attack? And it really goes through like the different buildings. So when I saw that overhead shot of it, I was almost like, oh my gosh, like that's when it really hit me truly, like how they had no place to go. But also as the movie unfolded the way it did, that kind of gave me a context as everybody was running to different places, and you saw their generator take a hit and all that kind of stuff. It gave me like an appreciation for where everything was and where these guys were trying to go. So that part of like setting it up, I thought was extremely well done. I would agree with you.
Yeah, I agree as well. I mean, I think that one of the things that really stuck with me of the Outpost is just how you feel like you're there with them, like Evan was saying, and how just like gritty and dirty and sweaty and almost like you could smell the film, right? And how they didn't, they didn't want it to be clean, or at least that seemed to be an intentional choice. Like, we want you to see like how it is, and then those long periods when the fighting really kicks off in earnest, like how you're with that person and you just feel like you're moving through that battle space with them, and just how crazy and confusing and dangerous it is. And I remember watching this movie and my wife was there with me, and she reached over and she's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "You're breathing really heavy." And I was like, yeah, I guess I am. Like, it felt like so intense, like it was such a visceral experience. But yeah, it was super well done. I really
enjoyed it. Felt like one of the more real ones that like I had seen and like we had watched. Like both of these did actually. It like, and I wrote that in the notes too. Like as I was watching through, this felt like more vivid, and I think you said it like gritty. Like it felt kind of raw in a way, which was really authentic.
Yeah. I think too, what I appreciated was I feel like some of the post 9/11 war movies can put their themes in front of story and character. Like they have something that they want to say about the war, or something that they want to say about the conflict. So sometimes those can be very overt and they can go in front of story and in front of character. Whereas what I really liked about this film is I think it did a very good job of putting you in a sympathetic position with the characters, showing their day-to-day, showing the positions that they're put in, and the themes work their way in naturally. Like a good story does, where, you got a sense of, the things that they have to deal with, like in like the bad logistics, the bad situations that they're put in, leadership changing and kind of the goals shifting, PTSD with like the Caleb Landry Jones character and stuff like that. But that wasn't, thrust up front. It all came naturally from the story and the characters.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so effective. And then you see, we'll probably get into this later, but there are common themes throughout both of the films that just those things that you mentioned, that I was like thinking those same things when I was watching Kilo 2 Bravo. Yeah,
I completely agree about the sympathetic sort of rise, because you have to spend some time with the unit. Any war movie, you got to get to know the characters, or else you're kind of just not going to care, because the chaos hits and it's just sort of like, things happening. But you really got to spend time as a storyteller to give a sense of like what these guys are living like, how their interactions are, who's friends with who, them calling home, talking to their loved ones, they're sort of the trials and tribulations of daily life there. But also, I thought they did a really good job of them interacting with the locals, sort of how there was sort of a tribunal that they had to sit at, and the communication barriers that they had to overcome before all the crap hits the fan. We really got a great sense of what these guys are there to try to accomplish. It's like, okay, yeah, they logistically have a terrible forward operating base, but they are there for this particular reason. And does that reason outweigh where they're at? There's a lot of good questions that it brings up. before the main battle happens, which is I can't remember, like it happens over a course of time in the film, but it happens very quickly. Like the battle takes up a good chunk, but you're following so many different characters, and it never gets confusing because some guys are trapped in a Humvee, some guys are trapped at the armory, some guys are trying to get over to the mortar pit. So you're kind of following all these things, and the filmmakers did a great job of just sort of weaving your way through all that, not only cinematography wise, like just actually following characters, but following storylines. And I want to bring up this one thing that they said, enemy in the wire. The enemy in the wire is just like, it's like the catchphrase of the movie, because I think that was actually said. Of course, the Taliban ended up coming down and actually coming into the base, which you never want to hear those words being shouted over the radio. But also just militarily, Ryan, I wanted to ask this question is, they call for help when they start getting attacked. Not only there was a force that was coming in from the mountains on foot to sort of give support there, and of course helicopters that would be sent in, but it takes a while for all of that support to start happening.
Yeah, and that would be every unit has a QRF, a quick reaction force, and at an echelon higher of this company that's at that outpost, they should have like this battalion or brigade level QRF that is designated to respond if something like this starts to happen. And you would have to imagine that with them knowing that they're so remote, like you would have built into your battle plan, which I think they discussed a little bit in the movie, like we're not going to, even if we call for help as soon as the first shot's fired, like we're not going to get help for a while. Mm-hmm. And there's all sorts of other different things, when they shout out enemy in the wire, right? That is just a necessary announcement to make so that that there is possibility that enemies being behind you. Not everyone behind this place is now a friendly, right? So you have to be aware of that so that you don't shoot a friendly or fail to shoot a bad guy, right? And there's all these other different sorts of defensive mechanisms and tools that they use to try to keep them out. But once that happens, like you can see it happen, and this is a theme that happens in both movies, right? Is like once one thing goes wrong and goes bad, like it just trickles into everything else, and simple things even become hard, right? And you see that in the movie, and at the sacrifice of life and blood, just to do a simple thing becomes so difficult when those simple things break down, and when now you're on the defensive and the enemy has the initiative, and you're trying to just get to from one place to the other, something that an hour ago you could have just walked there, and now it could cost you your life, right? Yeah.
And I felt that even when they weren't under attack, because every time it was daytime early in the movie, it's almost like you're holding your breath, waiting to see like at what time during the day they're going to get fired at. And every time somebody would walk out of a building or like walk out from under a canopy or whatever, it's like, and I think they did a good job in like creating a sense of that heightened danger because of where they were. Because every time somebody would walk out into an open space, even when they weren't in attack, I like felt myself taking like a little bit of a breath or like bracing myself, because I was like, okay, is this the moment where they're going to come under attack? But I agree with you, like just watching them try to run ammunition to these places was it was heartbreaking to watch sometimes, because it was like one person would go down and then the guy behind them would just pick up what they were carrying and keep trying to go. And like you said, it on a normal day they could just walk there,
and not leave somebody behind. If they were hit, it was
right
to get them. The two guys trapped in the Humvee, that was intense. Serious, because they were just being laid waste, like they were trapped in there, they couldn't move. And it was one guy was out, and he was Caleb Landry Jones' character wanting to go get him, and the other guy's like, don't, you're gonna get shot, don't. And superior officer telling him don't, he's like, I'm gonna go. And it's like there was such great rising tension through the whole thing. And I as a non-veteran myself, I think the only way that we can get even a mental sense is by very good filmmaking, very, very good filmmaking, because documentaries, I feel like, give you some sense, but the Hollywoodization of a movie can really start to like, it can give you that different feel. Is that right, Evan?
Yeah, it heightens the reality, and you can do things in a narrative film that you can't do in a documentary, because you can stage something that you don't have to worry about the filmmakers being injured. You can really put yourself in that situation, and the way that it was filmed and the way that it was so subjective with the characters, I think really what it built, or what it gave a sense of just the chaos of those moments, of it could be coming from any direction because of the way that the outpost is set up. There's mountains in every direction, and you're on the lower ground, so there's 360 degrees of threat. So if you want to make a run somewhere, it's like you have to worry about here and here and here, and you just don't know where it's going to come from. And and I thought the script did a really good job of giving you knew what was important. It didn't hit you over the head with it. Like, you knew that their mortar was kind of like their saving grace. They were good at launching the mortars, and that was a great way of like neutralizing threats as they came in. And when the big battle happens, that is not possible. Like, they can't get their mortars up, they can't go. So like their biggest tool to thwart these threats is they can't do it. So now they're kind of on their own, kind of making it up as they go along, kind of falling back into their plan of plan B, then plan C, then plan D, and then so yeah, I think that good filmmaking can heighten a reality that a documentary is not able to do when done well.
True. And I noticed that none of it was very well acted overall, which I do have a comment about in just a second, but overall very well acted, and that none of them were really losing it. Like, the medics were taking care of business. The guy in command of the base was trying to manage the chaos and what we need to do. But the only person that I kind of didn't have a really good feel for was Clint Eastwood's. Was that his cousin? Was that his brother? Was that his son? His grandson? His son,
right?
Scott Eastwood. Yeah.
I just felt like he was trying a little too hard to sound, and maybe, I don't know, he sounded like Captain America to me.
Sorry, pal, but that's life at Camp Keating.
He's a little G.I. Joe in it.
A little G.I. Joe.
But I, as a guy who grew up loving Clint Eastwood movies, the fact that we have a 20-some-year-old, 30-some-year-old guy that looks exactly like Clint Eastwood you can drop into a movie like this, I was like, let's go. Let's do it.
Yeah. I felt the same way. Right. I was like, I don't even care. There's an Eastwood talking tough in a movie with guns, and I can deal with it. But yeah, it was. I thought overall, yeah, it was pretty well acted, and the gentleman who I forget the actor's name, but he's the one who they show in the clinic at the very end, and he was awarded.
Caleb Landry Jones.
Yeah, what a fantastic actor that guy is, and just he became like. He became my favorite character as the movie progressed, as I'm sure probably with most people. But it showed earlier on like these interactions between all of these soldiers, and I thought it did a pretty good job of that, of how there were like different relationships, and this kind of devil may care attitude, right? They're out there in this outpost, and they know they could be killed at any time, right? Or they could just be overrun, and they're just like, well, it is what it is. We got to just make the best of it, right? And then they joke about it, and these morbid senses of humor, which have to, almost as a survival mechanism, evolve in these sort of situations. And and then you see this young man, this young soldier, go from being a person who's really pretty much dismissed as an F-up kind of soldier, rise to the occasion. And I thought that was like really well done to show his kind of arc through the movie.
And I like too that it kind of gave two portrayals of heroism in the, because they both win the Medal of Honor, Scott Eastwood's character and Caleb Landry Jones. And Scott Eastwood is kind of like the ideal version of heroism, kind of like this tough, like, the stuff has hit the fan, but we got to do this, blah, blah, blah. And then Caleb Landry Jones is kind of like this, what an act of heroism can do kind of on a psychological level. Like, he did something heroic, but he bore the brunt of that on an emotional and psychological level. And I thought that was really interesting, kind of the yin and yang of those two characters.
And so what you guys were saying too about like the dialogue and the connections, I thought it was interesting to see how everybody not only responded to each other, but responded when you had like different changes in command coming in, and how they would respond to like their superiors in different ways. I mean, I guess, you know, it's kind of like everything, people respond to like their higher ups in different ways, but like to see it in that setting, I thought all the actors did like a really good job of just portraying like how sometimes like different types of leadership and different personalities like clash and things like that. And, you know, also like one of the moments that I think like maybe got overlooked, but to me it was heartbreaking, was when, you know, they kept coming in and saying, hey, we're closing in July, we're closing this in November, and they kept backing it up. And like that was a moment that I think got overlooked, that I found like really heartbreaking. Like they think they're going home soon and then they keep backing it up and backing it up. But just like those little moments of like the dialogue, I really appreciate it. And I'm somebody that when I watch a movie, like I always look for like those dialogues and connections. So I thought, I agree with you all that was really well done.
Yeah. It goes back to like something that became a mantra for me in the army as I was going through, is like, I don't believe that anything is happening until it's actually happening. Like you can tell me over and over, it's going to happen on this day. I'm like, okay, I'll believe it when I see it. You know,
It's kind of like the guy yelling, you know, the Taliban is coming, you know, they're coming. And then they go, yeah, he's been saying that for 2 weeks, you know, and then it happens, you know.
But an overall, for the Outpost, we give it a thumbs up.
Definitely
a thumbs up. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I have the book, which I'd like to read through just to get a further sense. I'm sure it fleshes out a lot more of this. But it's based on the book by Jake Tapper. So if you have not seen The Outpost, definitely check it out. We'd love to hear from our audience about what your thoughts were. Jumping over to Kilo 2 Bravo, which was actually called Kajaki in Britain, but then came to North America, was changed the name to Kilo 2 Bravo. Evan, I'm really happy that you suggested this film. It was incredible. Can you give us an overview?
Yeah, it's about a British company of soldiers who they're kind of in an outpost where they don't see much action, not much is going on. And then they, I believe they see the Taliban kind of setting up an outpost. So they go to kind of check it out or investigate.
Set up a sniper position.
Yeah. And in doing so, they're crossing a dry riverbed and a mine goes off, injuring one of their soldiers. And then they kind of realize that they're stuck in a minefield. And I believe, I was reading more about it, but I believe they're Soviet mines from the 80s. And so then it becomes this kind of logistical battle of how do we get them out of here? We can't move because we're in a minefield. And at one point, I believe they call in a helicopter, but it's not a Black Hawk helicopter, which can offer like a winch to pull out. It's a Chinook, is that
Chinook?
Chinook? And there's a lot of downward force, so that launches off another mine, and it kind of becomes this similar to The Outpost, a very claustrophobic tale of survival. And I thought one of the most like unflinching looks at the horrors of that war that I've seen, where I mean the injuries are so brutal, yeah, I thought it was great.
This film made me uncomfortable the whole time in a good way. And let me explain by what I mean like that. I feel like people watch war movies for like the glory of it sometimes, and they don't understand, and they expect to see these like big battles, and they don't understand that like this is depicting real life, like people actually live through this. And I just felt uncomfortable and horrified the whole time. And that's what I loved most about it, because it was so real. And I think if anybody kind of wants a true sense of what people go through, this is it. And it gave me like, it made me feel appreciative. It made me feel scared for these guys. I was sick to my stomach watching it. By the end, I was like, I had tears in my eyes, like when they were showing the end credits and when they were finally like in the helicopter, because it was like they're fighting this invisible enemy the whole time that they can't see, and you don't know what's what's going to happen. It was just so suspenseful. I loved it. I just thought it was, again, this film was gritty and it was real. And that's, I think, the best thing about it.
Yeah, so I was not familiar with this movie. And I sat down and I watched it actually yesterday. So my thoughts are very fresh. And I had an idea of like where this movie was going to go. So I was like watching it and I was like taking all these notes. I'm like, okay, so we got all these British guys and they haven't seen any action for a while. And they're out there just hobnobbing around. Like they had, for the first like 20 minutes of the film, it just seemed like they didn't have a care in the world, right? They're suntanning, they're reading books, they're playing games, nothing's going on. And then I just had this thing like it's going to be like the Outpost, like they're going to get overrun with all these dudes. So like I'm like making this list of like mistakes they're making and all this stuff, and then like it looks like it's going to take this turn, like, oh, they're going out there and this is probably going to be a movie where like there's a couple dudes out there and they can't get to them and they're stuck in the sniper position, and that's kind of what I thought was going to happen. And there was a little bit of foreshadowing where he talks about all these, like, what are we going to leave behind in Afghanistan? And he's like, the Russians left like all these millions of mines across the country. And then they get down in there and they're just on a regular, like en route to where they can set up this sniper position, and then boom. And it happens, right? There's one dude, injured. And just like in the previous film and what I was mentioning earlier, like this one thing goes wrong and then it just cascades. And by the end of it, there's, 5-6 people injured by this. One of them, like, really critically. And as Kathryn was saying, you're stuck in this just like really visceral part. And I thought the filmmaker did a great part of just like, from the time the first mine went off, I was on the edge of my seat worried about when the next one was going to go off. And they just like the rolling rock scene where the rock just like gets kicked down the hill and you're just watching it the whole time, and it lands in that area and you're like, is a mine going to go off? And the mine just going, and they just almost going off unexpectedly. And it's like, it was crazy. And what these guys went through, right, to just try to save their buddy's life. And the insidious nature of these mines is they're obviously anti-personnel mines. They're not meant to like kill, they're meant to like maim, right? Because you see them, like they step on a mine, huge explosion. I mean, the one guy was in 3 or 4 of these explosions right in his general vicinity, and he just keeps getting more and more like injured. And it's so, yeah, it was like really hard to watch, and just how they had to like what they had to go through to survive that, and what they were willing to do for each other. Mm-hmm. And I thought one of the best parts about it was when the medic, that additional explosion goes off, and he sits up and his ears are ringing. And this is like the third one that one of these guys has been through. And he's been trying to hop over to where the injured people are. And he just gets up after he gets hit with this. And it was mostly a concussive blow, so he's not really like super injured. And he's just like, F it. And he just picks up his back and he just walks over to where the injured people are, where he had just spent so long trying to get there carefully. He was like, you know what? If I get blown up, I get blown. I'm trying to save my buddy's life. Mm-hmm. And I just thought that was like really, really, an intense part in the movie. But overall, I thought it was like, really well done. Very fantastic.
Well, I did the same thing you did, Ryan. Like, after watching The Outpost, I watched this like probably a week later, and then I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, well, they have no cover. Like, they're out here in these like little sand bunkers. They're sleeping without roofs. They're just like hanging out. One guy's swimming. I'm like, okay, I thought the same thing, because I had never heard this like narrative before. I didn't know anything about like the true story, and I'm thinking, I thought the same thing. I'm like, okay, this is what's going to happen. These are all the things, like, from watching all these movies and from the little bit of military knowledge that I've amassed from talking to so many people. This is what I know. I was not expecting that at all. And it was just, I know every time I was like, okay, this cannot be the last one. Like, I know that another one's going to go off and somebody else is going to get hurt. Like,
yeah, and it's very different at the beginning, because, beginning of The Outpost, you're panning around Scott Eastwood and just seeing these mountains and feeling that claustrophobia. At the beginning of this one, maybe the British just know how to set up better forward operating bases, but this one's on top of the mountain and they do an aerial shot of that whole area. And it's like, yeah, no one's going to get to these guys. And go ahead, Evan. Yes.
Oh, no, I the one thing I was going to say was, because of this situation, it's kind of like the opposite of The Outpost, in that The Outpost, they're kind of in the middle of nowhere and they're waiting for people that can come and help, and in any way that they can. And in this, there are so many people by that riverbed, but they're just not able to help because of the situation that they're in. Like, they're surrounded by, friendlies, but there's no way to go into that minefield safely. So it's kind of like you have all this support, but they're kind of helpless to watch this situation unfold until they get, the right help, until they can get a helicopter that can, come down in. And I was reading something about the Black Hawk helicopters. There's something about the blades that don't have as much downward force so that they could fly lower or something like that and not set off the mines.
Ryan, do you know anything about those?
I do. I do know that a Chinook, I mean, it would have to have less downward force. The Chinook is a 2 vertical prop, and it's just a huge helicopter, and it has like those big jet engines on the back, which you see kind of work in the movie where it's like blowing that stuff all over the place. But yeah, and Blackhawks are primarily used and equipped to do medevacs, medical evacuations, where Chinooks typically aren't. Like they can move big amounts of people, but they don't typically have like the capability that a UH-60, a Blackhawk does. But you see it at the end of the film, like the winches and the hoists and everything, and how they're able to get people out. And they would have flight surgeons right on, or flight medics like right on the Blackhawk, and prepared to receive multiple litters, of people and stuff like that.
I was just like really shocked too. We talk about like, how remote these guys are. Like, did you notice at the beginning, they're just like waiting for battery to power their communication. And for me, that was like a little bit of foreshadowing. I was like, okay, at some point, like communication is going to break down a little bit, which I guess it kind of does in a way. But like, just for them to get basic things like batteries, and the way they rushed to the supplies when they came, it seemed like they had been waiting for a really long time, like just for basic things that to me, it seems like, okay, this is what we need to make this like outpost run successfully. I feel like in every one of these movies, there's like a tie into to like something happens with the communication or proximity of help that makes it just like even more of a tragedy.
I would say to our audience, though, go into that first half hour with the closed captioning on.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, because this is a British movie, docu-drama. So there are tons of sort of British war military slang that they are using, that I'm so glad I was able to read it, because the accents are there and very authentic. I'm sure they're all British actors. But I was lost on a lot of the conversations, and thankfully I had the closed captioning on so I could sort of read it and you could follow along. But if you don't know British slang, they're not shy about using it. It's very heavy in the first like half hour, 45 minutes.
And they were joking with each other too in some ways. And I was like, what is that? If I had to read it, because I didn't understand like some of the jokes they were making to each other, because it was all in, a slang that we're not familiar with.
Mm-hmm. And okay.
I was going to agree. It is like, it takes me a while, like when I'm listening to like a British movie, like, or even if it's like a show on Netflix or something, like it takes a while for like my brain to start translating British to English.
And you wouldn't think, because it's all English, but it's like, I wish I could bring up some what am I going to say? Samples from the movie of what they were saying, because it's so many different things that you're just like, wait, what does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? But it was, go ahead, Bevan.
Oh, I was just going to say that another similar thing to the Outpost and what Ryan was saying about like not believing it until you see it. There's a character in the movie that tells them that, there's a helicopter 10 minutes away for like 4 hours, like most of the day, and it is, I think both films kind of do a great job at illustrating the struggles that these guys go through, one on a much more grand scale, and like the Outpost, and then this movie is a very like even more claustrophobic, very small setting, but I thought the filmmaker did a great job of really building the tension with minimal elements. It's like, it's kind of like Jaws. It's not seeing the shark is what builds the tension, and not knowing where these mines are, not knowing where it's safe to go, and just feeling you're just helpless. The only thing you can do is stay still and try to keep the spirits of the injured men high, and that becomes a big part of like the second half of the film, is just keeping these guys engaged and keeping these guys feeling like there's still hope to get out of here.
There was that one scene between the two guys. It was the first guy that got injured, and he's telling his buddy, like, hey, you know, tell my wife I have a baby on the way. Tell my wife, like, I want the baby to be named this if it's a boy and this if it's a girl. And his friend, who is uninjured, just like loses it on him and it's like, I'm not telling her anything, like, you're making it out of here. And then they all just like sit there and laugh. But like that moment I felt was like, kind of got me in a way. Like I felt that was one of the like really well like acted points of the film, where his buddy's like, no, you know, like, we came down here for you and we're all stuck, so you better make it. I just thought like that like interpersonal dynamic was really well done too.
Yeah, for them to all be, there's this tension, this massive amount of tension that was broken at points because of the human element of them being like, they would laugh. The horrific scene that they are in, and there would be these moments of levity where they would all laugh. And it was just like, you know, you can't, you know, as an actor myself, you can't have tension last for that long without breaks in the tension. You have to have some level of here and there. There was even the sort of like the ghostly, you know, tension of the background where are the Taliban going to attack this position? Because if you don't know the story, you're waiting for some enemy to attack. They're down in a valley, just like in the Outpost. You know, you're waiting for, are they stuck in a minefield and they get attacked? And it's just like, you know, this continuous build. But to speak to your point, Evan, about the claustrophobia of that whole second half of the movie, you can't have wide shots. You can't have like everything pulled back and all that. Everything is intimate, in your face. And that really speaks to how well this movie was acted. Just amazing acting overall from the whole cast. Especially the medic. It was just like you were really pulling for him because you just saw the desperation on his face, that he was like, I have to help him. How am I going to get across this minefield? What do I have to do? And I love the point where his buddy says, as he's sort of jumping across this minefield, mentions about his girlfriend or his wife, and he just looks back at him like, why would you mention this right now? Yeah. And then he says it, he mutters, what the hell am I doing?
Yeah.
You know, I get chills thinking about solid, just good acting that really pulls you into the story.
Yeah, that was probably my favorite example in the movie of like the morbid sense of humor that can come out. And this guy is like literally throwing his backpack to see if there's any mines, and then jumping onto his backpack, and he doesn't even make it 2 jumps, and the guys behind him are already making fun of him. Like, here he is jumping through a minefield to try to get to his buddies, and they're like, and they're making fun of him about it. And I was like, wow, like there are certain movies and times where like you can see like that type of humor come out that is pretty accurate, that can exist in like especially infantry units or combat units or any unit that's in like that's very close knit. That's one of them. And I thought about that when you were mentioning that. I was like, that was one of my favorite parts of the movie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The second half of the film could almost be like a stage play. You know, it's
completely,
you know, it's just actors in one location. And that's really where, you know, they shine. And talking about like the humor element of like that gallows humor in such a like harrowing situation. I love too that at one point they like, as they're laughing, they pull back to like the support on the ridge. Mm-hmm. And like, you know, to them, they're like, what the hell are these guys laughing about? Like, they're in the worst situation I could possibly imagine. So it's like the filmmaker like pulls out to show the absurdity of this. But, you know, those are the things that keep people alive, you know, because I would imagine that when you're in that type of scenario, the moment that you feel hopeless is the moment that it becomes hopeless, you know, and that kind of stuff, that remaining, you know, it helps you keep your humanity in those situations and keep up hope. And I thought they did a really good job of illustrating that in a way that felt realistic to the characters themselves.
You were getting like character arcs throughout the whole thing. You were getting exposition dumps here and there from the characters, but it was so natural. It made you feel for them. They were talking about people and their family, their loved ones, all these things that you don't know any of those people, any of those characters, but you could tell they meant a lot to that character. And that's solid acting. That's really solid. So, I mean, just beyond the story, And the fact that it was a well-made movie, I recommend it simply for like actors who might be just looking for like just a well-made film.
Well, that's too, like when I see good acting and in a movie that's based on a true story, my thought always goes back to like, okay, like did these actors spend time with these guys? Like how much did they talk to them? How much did they immerse themselves in like the history of this moment? Like how, you know what I mean? Like as an actor, I've never acted a day in my life, but like, I mean, it just kind of makes me wonder like what their prep was like for this to really get into their mindset. And cause I'd imagine, if you're in a movie playing a true character, you'd want to, talk to that person in real life if you could and all that. It just makes me wonder like how they like prepped and were able to get in that mindset of being present in that moment, that they didn't experience for real.
It's tough. It's very tough as an actor to be able to convey tension, I think. And they all did such a great job of that throughout that entire second part. And the one thing that was maddening about that second half of the movie was, where is the helicopter? Why are they not communicating that this is a minefield? Every time a helicopter like this Chinook shows up and they're like, minefield, they're screaming at these guys like, get out of here, we need a Black Hawk. And you're just like, what, where is the helicopter? Get it there, like, come on. And that's something I wanted to ask you about, Ryan, because it's like, how many points were you just like, just get there, just get the orders in and get there?
Yeah. So I thought the same thing. And so I was like thinking about like, what are all the reasons that this could happen, right? Like, so number one, I think would be the setting, right? Like as Evan described, like they're obviously in a place where they're at a dam, right? And there's civilians around. So, and there's not much going on. So there probably might not be, medevac assets nearby, because it's kind of like we need to put them in places where it's more dangerous, where they're probably going to be needed more often, right? Mm-hmm. I think the other probably biggest thing is, right, in Afghanistan, you had this international coalition of forces. And so there's the British Army, the American Army, other people. And anytime you have like that difference, there's probably going to be layers of communication that need to be worked through. And so it looked to me like those were American, helicopters coming in to do the medevac, which is probably, I would imagine, accurate. And then how far away are they? And then relaying that communication. We already saw through the movie their communication is bad. And then what is the normal? So normally, typically how it would work is like you would call up what's called a 9-line medevac. This is how American forces do it. And there's 9 lines, obviously, about what the injury is, what the potential landing site is like. Do we need any special equipment like a hoist? What is my radio frequency? And so what would happen, how am I going to mark the landing site? Those things like that. So then what would happen is, like, if it's approved, right, the helicopter would come in, they would radio you, because you would have told them when you called it up, this is my frequency. So the helicopter would radio you. And then it would say like, okay, this is what we're doing we're coming on this heading. They would establish communication and do the medevac. And so when you have all of these like different layers of communication, bad communication between two different military forces of two different countries, like it seems like very plausible how that would happen, how it would take so long. And then you can also kind of imagine you are the person in charge of getting these helicopters out there, right? First initial report comes in, hey, British guy stepped on a mine. That's all you heard, right? Okay, they're requesting a medevac. Okay, what do they need? I mean, they weren't even aware at that point that they needed a hoist, because they thought it was just kind of like a one-off, right? And then it just snowballs, right? So then like getting that information out there, and then you're like, you as maybe the combatant commander is like, well, I need to focus my resources on where the battle is. Some guy stepping on a mine on a dam where we haven't seen any action lately is not exactly top of my priority. So like, then it just kind of snowballs until it becomes like so necessary for it to happen. And everything in the military takes a long time. So I can see how that would occur, that it would go from like, we need this now to it's several hours later and we're finally getting it, So
I know that by the time, like, I think it was the 4th mine that went off, I just buried my head in my hands and was like, no, like, yeah. Oh my God, these guys, like, you just really felt terrible for them. And that leads me to my big question here. As a civilian, and maybe somebody who, years ago, I could probably watch any war movie and feel for the characters and be interested in the story and really enjoy the film and overall the experience. But I think the time that I've spent talking with veterans over the past couple of years and the stories I've heard, the real stories that I've heard, I watch a movie like this and it affects me more now than it did a couple years ago. It affects me more now to watch what I know these guys went through and the losses they experienced because of the time I've spent with veterans. And that's something that I hope our audience maybe takes away from this is like, you can watch a movie like this and really, sort of see the scenario, feel the tension, the danger, all of these things. But spend some time talking with a veteran or a group of veterans, and then go back and watch it again and see how much your mindset changes.
And that was kind of what I was mentioning earlier, like when I said this movie made me like physically uncomfortable. And I think that's why I have so much more of a sense now about how real things are with, like you, Shaun, with the stories I've heard and everything. And that's why I said, like, I feel like a lot of people sometimes just watch this for an entertainment value purpose because they like war movies. And I think that maybe some people so many times like glaze over the fact like this is real. I think this movie was probably one of the realest I've seen that like evoked the most emotion out of me, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I do love at the end that you get an end credits, you get in a sense of like who the actual guys were, where they are now, where they've come, because they're stepping on mines, they're losing limbs. Like, how did these guys survive? I wish there was almost a sequel to Kilo 2 Bravo to give us the real guys and what they're out there doing, because a lot of them went on to have very successful lives, and you think, how do you come out of that trauma? That's sort of my next question for this unit. How did they come out of this? And these guys and the trials that they had to overcome after being in a minefield.
I think one of the guys went back to service.
He did
with a prosthetic, which is like, I mean, that's incredible.
To that same place. He went to that same place like a few years later. That's like a different breed right there. Just some people are built different.
Evan, you saw that. We'll bring it all full circle back to we left as brothers. You watched them come back to Vietnam. A little different, not serving, but going back to a place where they experienced combat, conflict, trauma. What was your experience watching that?
It was fascinating. Just seeing how different people react to the situation, because I think that there can be a temptation amongst civilians to generalize the veteran experience. If you don't know many people that serve, or you're taking in a lot of your information about how veterans interact with each other or feel about war through films or media. So to be there and have 6 different people who had 6 different experiences in the war to begin with, whether they were military police or Marine or in the Army, an Army captain, so you have all these different people with different experiences going back for different reasons. And it was really interesting to see how each of them kind of reacted. And I think after talking to all 6 of them, I think they all felt that they benefited from it. I think especially Vietnam, there's a lot of, I think for the veterans that served in Vietnam, that weighs heavy on them, because of, how horrific the fighting was, but also how the relationship with the civilian population was when they got home, and how the culture amongst that era of veterans kind of became one where you don't talk about your experiences. You put that away. People don't want to hear about it. It's not popular. You might get called baby killer. You might get called, these horrible things for doing what was asked of you from your country. So it was really fascinating to see how each responded, and that at the end of the day, it did feel like they were all able to take some sense of closure, some sense of peace, and they took it from different areas too, which was really interesting to see as well. And I think just seeing a place that experienced war. I mean, that was the first place I've ever gone that had experienced war that you could tell at one point that they experienced war, you know, going to places where there are still B-52 craters, where, you know, there are places that still have, you know, bullet holes in the facade or, you know, things that have not been rebuilt since the war. So even 50 years later, seeing the scars of war. But I think for those guys, it was so good to see how far it had come, you know, because when they left it, it was, you know, in ruins, you know, in many of the places that they were serving. So to see these places that were like, you know, to be at Marble Mountain and there's gift shops now, you know, I think to them is like, could you imagine? You know, this is a hunk of rocks here, you know? So yeah, it was an incredible experience.
And to sort of finish up our reviews of both, obviously we all really liked Kilo 2 Bravo, but Ryan, you know, your firsthand experience in the military, you look at both these films and say, post 9/11, you know, these are two films that really sort of give us an experience of what war in Afghanistan was like.
Oh yeah, I mean, for sure. So I've never been to Afghanistan, right? But you know, I can certainly respect and understand the terrain and the difficulties, and you know, soldiering is very similar everywhere. Yeah, I think that they were both fantastic, and you know, I'd love to give you a Ryan rant, but it's tough to do a Ryan rant about true stories, right? Like, if anything, I would rant about, like, you know, why did these guys have to go through that? Right, it would be kind of directed at what the wrongs that were done to these people to put them in the situation that would do that, and that's a real shame. But I really respect what Evan said about you know, watching these guys gain something from their return to their point of conflict, and I think that that's really great. And hopefully, you know, this generation of veteran can get that closure at some point as well. With different things like you know, a war memorial on the National Mall, or being able to travel back to some of these places where they were in conflict. I know personally, if it was ever offered to me, you know, in 20 or 30 years, I'd love to go back to Iraq and see some places that I went. But maybe one day, right?
Well, this does it for this episode of the Scuttlebutt. We're going to definitely do another movie review because I've really been enjoying diving into the post 9/11 war movies, and maybe Kathryn will take her hand at suggesting the next two. But we thank you for joining us on the podcast. Please like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, and drop me a line, Shaun, SHAUN, at veteransbreakfastclub.com, to this illustrious panel. Thank you guys all for jumping in and chatting war movies with me. And we will hopefully see you soon on another episode.